So now we'll go on to hear from Lynne McTaggart, whose chapter is Healing the World from the Ground Up. Lynne is the award-winning author of 7 books, including the worldwide bestsellers The Field, The Intention Experiment, and The Power of 8.
Hello, everybody. It's such a great honor to be here, to be part of this amazing book, this amazing endeavor, and of course, to be with Ervin Laszlo and supporting Ervin Laszlo, who is one of the great heroes of our times and of my life, and David Lorimer, too, who has done so much with science and medicine in bringing them together in an integrative way and bringing new ideas to that community. Now, I want to share my screens, and while that is happening, I just want to talk a little bit about my work and the intention experiment. Back in 2007, I am a journalist by background, an investigative reporter. I started out in life busting baby selling rings and trying to put bad guys in jail. And as I moved into this sphere, I was listening to a lot of information about manifestation and law of attraction. And the hard-nosed journalist in me basically said, well, how far can we take this? What are we talking about? Are we talking about a tiny quantum effect, like shifting a quantum particle? Are we talking about curing cancer with our thoughts? And so I had the idea of creating an intention experiment. By then, I knew a lot of scientists working in consciousness research, and I had a number of readers around the globe. My book, The Field, was in 30 languages. So I figured if I could put them all together, I'd have the biggest global laboratory in the world. And that's what I've been doing, as I say, since 2007. So I started doing intention experiments, everything from trying to make seeds grow faster, to purifying water, to lowering violence in war-torn areas, to trying to heal someone of post-traumatic stress disorder. We've run 41 of these experiments to date, 37 of which have shown measurable, positive, mostly significant effects. And just to put that in context, there is no pharmaceutical drug out there that has had that kind of consistent track record. And I've done probably 11 peace intention experiments by now, always working with a scientist who has been involved in consciousness research. And this is one of the examples of the 11, and all of them have shown a measurable response. So just to give you an idea, we did a Healing America intention experiment back in 2017. And the idea was to choose the most violent place in America, and we did, which was a neighborhood in St. Louis, Missouri, which has this kind of real estate. So not a great place to be, but one of the highest levels of violence. And in fact, the whole city is violent, but this is the worst. So I worked with Dr. Jessica Utz, who is one of the leading scientists in consciousness research and looking at statistics. She's a professor of statistics at the University of California. So she asked me to get 3 years of data about violent crime and property crime in St. Louis as a whole, in the surrounding neighborhoods, and then the neighborhood we were focusing on, which is called Fairground. It's like a little subsection of St. Louis. So we did that. We looked at 3 years before, saw violence was going up in an upward trajectory in all areas, and particularly in Fairground. And then we waited for 6 months after our intention experiment. It was 6 days of 10-minute intentions over, as I say, over about a week. And 6 months later, we looked at the data, all coming from the police. And here's what happened. St. Louis violent crime as a whole was up, continuing on its upward trajectory. Property crime up, Fairground property crime was up, but the focus of our intention, violent crime, was down by 43%. We thought, wow, that's pretty cool. But it isn't the point of my story. Something else happened that started to blow my mind. And I had started seeing this from the time I did intention experiments looking at peace, trying to lower violence someplace or restore peace in war-torn areas. And I started seeing something strange. I began surveying people back in 2008 to ask them what happened to them during the intention experiment. I wanted to see if they were in any way affected. And I started getting these extraordinary responses, thousands of them. People were saying they were changed in some way. They were experiencing peace in their own lives. They were feeling closer to loved ones. Relationships were getting healed. They were telling me they had a new life purpose. A number of them quit their jobs and joined the Peace Corps and other things like that. And most amazingly, they reported, about half reported they feel closer to everyone they come in contact with. They were essentially hugging strangers. So I didn't know what to make of this. And some of the individual stories were amazing, like Sylvie Frasca, who is an Italian who lives in France, who was overworked, working night and day as a translator, and also having difficulty with her partner, who was a total atheist who did not believe any of the things she believed about using their minds to affect the outside world. In fact, she is a Reiki master, and he didn't want anything to do with it. He participated one day with her in one of my earliest peace intention experiments, and his whole outlook on this changed. Her whole outlook on her work changed. And again, I sort of started thinking, what on earth is going on here? Most recently, to give you some idea about this, I began running some intention experiments for the whole Israeli situation, Palestinian situation. We've run 3 such intention experiments with about 30,000 people participating. And these are the kinds of responses we got. And by the way, right after we did this, there was the ceasefire. That I think it was 5, 6, 7-day ceasefire. Did we do this? Short answer, who knows? I mean, there's so many variables in a war. It's time for us to do this again, clearly. But what started happening once again, when I surveyed those 30,000 people, I got back thousands of responses of people saying, 40% saying they feel more love for loved ones, about it more than a quarter, getting along with people they normally argue with, 30% more tolerant of people who are not like them, and up to 40% saying they have physical improvements or healings. And once again, about half feel more love for everyone they come in contact with. Here are some of the responses we've got. One of the people wrote in, my boss especially was really cheerful and happy this week, even though his business is going under and he has a lot of serious health problems. I've never seen him behave like that before. I've known him for years. Someone else, I've had a bad relationship with my dad. Now it's like a new birth and it feels so homey. Someone else, my son and I are communicating more. He replies almost instantly to my messages, whereas before it could be days or not at all. Someone else, my partner and I have been living in the same house, but barely communicating. But since the experiment, we've been amicable and able to hold a civil discussion, which is amazing. Someone else, I'm more tolerant and don't react when somebody is harsh or insulting. Someone else, I try to be less judgmental, listen more and be more present with people. I've had thousands of responses like that and more. A third of the people, as always, reported physical improvements, things like this. A type 1 diabetic saying his blood glucose levels are better controlled. Other people saying they've got overpain, or rewiring of their brain is occurring. Somebody else saying their deep depression is lifted. Someone else saying their mental health is better, and on and on. Emotions are easier to accept and go through me. Again, I see this with every peace intention experiment. So I started recognizing that what I was witnessing was a mirror effect, that somehow we were observing the people who were participating also having an effect. If we were sending out intention for peace, they were receiving it as well. Now, around 2008, I started to scale all of this down to power of 8 groups, as I call them. I started putting people in small groups just to see what would happen. To me, it was another experiment. And I was shocked by what was happening. I did not expect it to be anything other than a feel-good effect. But this will give you an example of the thousands of healings that I now see in every regard. People with all kinds of issues in their lives. This is the kind of thing that happens. This is what one 10-minute group intention did for Esther. She had stage 4 melanoma. She came to a workshop of mine held in a place called Broughton Hall, which is in North Yorkshire. It's a stately home, a 16th century stately home with 3,000 acres. And I hold retreats there every year. So she came with stage 4 melanoma, very weak, came with her son. And here's her son telling and explaining what happened after one 10-minute intention for her.
She came with this diagnosis and not knowing if she would live for long or not. And my mother always taught me less is more. And of course it was a full week with a lot of teaching and everything, but what made all the difference was that one intention. I say it again. What made all the difference was that one intention we did for her in the library, in this Broughton Hall, old-fashioned library. You know, we had like, it was before we went for dinner. We said let's do one here. We were sitting in a circle, and I was guiding and I was leading, and these 10 minutes felt like an eternity. And I know my mother. You know, my mother is a natural doctor and she's a therapist, and she gave so many people healing. But what I witnessed in these 10 minutes that really felt like an eternity was such a deep healing. We all felt it, but Mom said, she said, I'm healed. And, you know, maybe someone else would laugh about it, but I didn't laugh. We all didn't laugh. And I think that was really, and she sees it that way as well, that was the beginning of her healing, because that seed of healing was planted in that very moment. And the belief that she is healed and can be healed, you know, at the end it's always difficult to say what was it, what was the factor. But for her and for me, for all of us, it was very clear that that healing started then. And she didn't say, I am healing, she said, I am healed. Of course, there were a lot of setbacks in the process, and of course she did other treatments, all natural treatments. But for me, that very moment changed everything. And I was then sick during the course, and for 3 days, and had to vomit. I didn't get a lot out of the course, but I witnessed that moment, and I was there. And that little moment, these 10 minutes, were worth everything. And my mom, they checked her up, the radiologists, they checked her up again. They do not find any trace of cancer anymore.
And I've seen this thousands of times now. I've seen 2 people get out of their wheelchairs. I've seen people with genetic liver diseases, people who were due for a transplant, healed with one 10-minute intention. Now, I started thinking, okay, what's going to happen if I put people in groups for a whole year? Would they heal everything in their lives? answer for the people who consistently meet in a small group week after week, which is what I usually tell people to do, they invariably heal something really important in their lives, and many of them heal everything in their lives. For instance, this is what this year-long Power of Eight intention group did for Mitchell Dean. Mitchell Dean is a clinical psychologist, a psychotherapist too, but he's had lifelong clinical depression, which isn't a good look for a clinical psychologist. But here's what happened to him after working with this group, which was called Helios. I named the groups after different things. That year it was Greek gods. Oftentimes it's Beatles songs.
What happened right around the beginning of that time was realizing that a lot of this is related to how my liver processes toxins. And that had never been named in all the years I'd been working on this. And suddenly it became apparent that the second level of liver filtration apparently wasn't working very well. And we got a hold of that one, began to treat that with herbs and supplements, and it really helped. I think, though, there's something more synergistic than just an allopathic idea that this cured the depression. It was like at the same time, I found my Qigong practice was getting much deeper. My meditations were deeper. I was finding I was much more able to just take better care of myself. During that Helios time, my practice got much more interesting, and I began to integrate ways of working that I'd wanted to do for years that had never quite worked. And so all of those have their own sort of antidepressant effect, right? It was like everything got healthier. It doesn't go nearly as deep. It doesn't happen nearly as often. I can still have blue days, but they feel more like blue days instead of really, really heavy ones. And so it's made a huge difference. Yeah. In that same process, I lost a good 15 pounds. Yes. I mean, it was such an interesting time. My trainer at one point kept joking, I don't know what's going on with you, man. It's like you're aging backward. Like this shouldn't be possible at 45 that your muscle mass is going up while your body fat's going down, working out once a week. What exactly are you doing, man?
And even more got healed in Mitchell Dean's life. He overcame his writer's block. He was able to produce a new type of therapy that he'd been working on for years, and on and on and on. And I've seen that with year-long Power of Eight groups. They've healed things like vitiligo, like Allison. They've left soulless jobs like Marianne and created their own work, their own valuable and rewarding work, or started their own business like Jolie, or started their own website like Bev, and received a windfall just when she needed it from Lloyd's of London. And like Melissa, a brand new job, and Trudy, who regained her hearing, and Andy, who went through a model divorce and got a dream job. Now, I started wondering too, what if we put people together who are polarized, who are enemies, sworn enemies? So in late 2007, I began an intention experiment with a guy who has hosted me in the Middle East called Dr. Salah Al-Rashid. He's like the Deepak of the Middle East. He has a huge Arabic following. So I asked him to bring and invite people from all of the Gulf states. And we worked with special equipment that enabled me to put cameras in conference rooms in 9 different locations. We did it with 8 different conference rooms filled with Arabs in different Arab cities, like cities in Jordan and Saudi Arabia and Kuwait and so forth. And the 9th camera we put in an auditorium of Israeli Jews. And we invited them all to do a peace intention experiment for Jerusalem, which 3 religions and more have a stake in. So Jerusalem, particularly the old part of the city, the Damascus Gate area, had been experiencing a great deal of violence. So we all did an intention together. And with this equipment, afterward, I could ask the various people at the different locations to tell me how that was for them. And they could respond to me, but also everybody else. So I could speak to them, they could speak to me, and all of the other people participating in the different locations. In the beginning, to put this intention experiment together, I had to broker the whole thing. Both sides were not speaking to each other. Even the groups who were heading up, the Arabs and the Israelis, would not communicate. I had to be the go-between. This is what happened afterward. We have someone from
Amman. This amazing experience. We all here crying at the room, our tears falling down.
Like a big party. I like to have fun, so I feel fun. I feel like I was young again, like I'm in a big party.
Like a commercial that you see on the road, and it was written, the peace is already here.
Yes. Jeddah in Saudi Arabia.
I saw myself there. I felt very strong love for the Jews, in spite of our raising up to hate the Jews. Beautiful feelings, beautiful images of unity, oneness, love, and peace.
We live in Jerusalem. We know it personally. And I've seen images of hugging, of soldiers and Arab people, of kindness one to another, of flowers all around Damascus Gate. This is so emotional. And I've seen the four quarters of the old city as the four rooms of my personal heart.
Yes, you're on Abu Dhabi.
Israelis are dancing, the Palestinians, they hug each other, and we are with the Israelis, like we share peace and love, which is an amazing thing. And I want to thank you and everybody participate in this participation.
Tunisia.
Yes, Tunisia. We saw a lot of children running and laughing. And there is a lot of butterflies and wearing a white clothes and running. And there is a lot of a loud voice of laughing.
You took me to the place I really love. I saw there a sunny day, lots of people laughing, lots of joy and happiness. I wish I could stay there. I wish I didn't come back.
My name is Fatima Salemi, and the peace in Arabic means salam, and my name is Salami. So I feel in peace, I feel in love. I love all people in the whole world. I love you. I love you so much, and I feel full of love and full of peace. Your God is my God. I love you.
My name is Lily from Jerusalem. It's so overwhelming, the possibility to be connected with you, our sisters in Amman and in Damascus and in Iran and all over. We are thousands, hundreds of thousands of women here saying enough. It's about time to unite. We are one.
So that happened after one 10-minute intention. People who were sworn enemies, who refused to talk to each other, who had been brought up to hate the other, were suddenly saying, your God is my God. We love you, brothers and sisters. And I started really realizing something very important, which was, it was interesting and incredible that we were getting the outcomes we had with the intention experiment. But I started to wonder whether or not that was being overwhelmed by the actual responses of the participants themselves. It seemed to be that the action itself wasn't as important as the contribution of the participants, because their lives were transforming. Now, I didn't know why. I couldn't figure out why would people heal their lives so quickly, and why would we be able to overcome polarization. So I did a study with a team of neuroscientists at Life University, one of the largest chiropractic universities in the world. They put their team of neuroscientists at my disposal, and we found, with using a batch of student volunteers, total novices, that their brainwave signatures, because we put an EEG cap on one member of each group, very quickly, profoundly altered. It was nothing like meditation. What happened was a lowering of the parts of the brain that make us feel separate. There was a quieting of all brain waves, but particularly the right frontal lobes, the part involved with worry, doubt, negativity, and the parietal lobes, the part that sit toward the back of the head, the top of the head, and help us navigate through space and tell us what is me and what's not me. They were dialed way down. These were people whose brainwave signatures were almost identical to those measured by Dr. Andrew Newberg when measuring Buddhist monks in ecstatic prayer and Sufi masters during chanting. A quieting of the parietal lobes, a quieting of the right frontal lobes, a blurring of me, not me. My people were in a state of ecstatic oneness. And that, I believe, is one of the secret sauces of Power of Eight groups and small groups, and why they are so transformational. People get to experience the feeling of oneness. We all talk about, hey, we're all one, but we live our lives in total separation. But people experience it when they do intention in a group, like some of these people here.
You know, what I believe in that group of 8 was opening directly to source, to each of our hearts, and this huge expanse of awareness of a universe, you know, bigger than any of us. It's a sense of wellness and well-being that I can't say I've experienced before.
Intention in this group and in a group does something very powerful to the body and mind that, and all of us are meditators and do a lot of, you know, personal growth work, that we don't get that anyplace else, and we can't do that by ourselves.
I felt the energy running through our hands. I felt the vibrations in the room change. I felt a very sort of special atmosphere was being created. I don't know, high vibration, very pure, little piece of heaven, call it what you want. But there was something that seemed to me that there was something special in that room.
So there is the whole thing of oneness, but why do people overcome polarization in this 10-minute intention period? For that, I found the answer with 2 scientists. One is a psychologist called Dacher Keltner, who is at the University of California at Berkeley. He has done studies looking at the effect on the vagus nerve when people are in different situations. So with one study, he took student volunteers and put them in 2 groups. One group were shown photos of the world's victims, like starving children. The second group were shown pictures designed to elicit pride in who they were as students at Berkeley. So pictures of the campus, pictures of them defeating their greatest rivals at football, Stanford. And afterward, Keltner showed them other groups of pictures and found that group 1 felt closer to people who were not like them. If they were Republicans, close to Democrats. Vice versa, too, if they were Democrats, close to Republicans, or the homeless, or even prisoners. Group 2 felt closer to the people they would become. Doctors, lawyers, financiers. And so he found that when we do something altruistic, it affects The vagus nerve, the longest nerve in the body that starts at the neck, winds its way and does pit stops at all the major organs, and has an important, a vital contribution in connection, feelings of safety, and love. It affects the release of oxytocin, which is the love nerve and the love hormone, usually released when mothers are caring for babies, for instance. It's released hugely during altruistic activity. Barbara Fredrickson, University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, psychologist, discovered the same thing. When people are engaged in altruism, and particularly in groups, it affects the vagus nerve. They feel more connected and more loving, and they act more loving. And there's been other research showing that small groups can activate the vagus nerve, move us away from fight or flight to a feeling of connection and safety. And that's what I believe happens with the power of a group. And when people are involved in shared altruistic emotions, it changes the brain, and it is more effective than doing that by yourself. And the same thing happens, in my experience, when people get off of themselves. And that's what I usually say to people who are stuck. Get off of yourself, intend for someone else, and see what happens. And this is what happened to Andy when she did this.
Being instructed as part of a class to focus on somebody else, I felt a lightness right there. And then we started for Luke for a couple weeks. And I want to say very quickly, within that first 2 weeks, I ended up getting a completely unexpected job offer. I wasn't looking for that type of job. I never thought this person would offer me a job. And I didn't even really expect that I would get any job offers, because I hadn't really been putting myself out there in that 2 weeks. I've been doing some other stuff. So it was just totally out of the blue in every way you can humanly imagine. And it was right up my alley. I had a gift store for many years. I did product development for a lot of the manufacturers and the artists that I supported. And this was a job working for a prominent artist who needed help putting her art on products. So I was uniquely suited to that.
And I've seen this also hundreds of times when people finally get off themselves and start intending for someone else. And that's the beauty of a Power of 8 group. 7/8 of the time, you're intending for someone else. Incredible things happen. Andy had been looking for a job for months and months and months. And as soon as she focused on someone else, a young boy called Luke, she got the job offer out of nowhere. What I have found with the big intention experiments, with the small Power of 8 groups, are major change. People's lives heal. They heal each other. They can heal polarization. They come together. And as Jerry put it, this is the basis of it all.
But the biggest thing is sense of compassion, empathy, love, caring that we have for each other. I can't replace that. I've done better in the COVID season than I have at any time in my life, I think, certainly in terms of just being able to be connected with people. And so that's the true treasure that I've experienced.
Jerry not only joined a Power of 8 group for a year, but loved it so much. And as he said, he's felt more love during the COVID season than he ever has in any part of his life. And so he joined it the next year, and this is what happened.
But the biggest thing is sense of compassion, empathy, love. You can feel the love. I mean, I now know what love feels like when you're getting it from other people over the airwaves.
I now know what love is. And I think that is one of the powers and how we can transform the world from the ground up, from the bottom up. Instead of looking to the big guys in charge, I think we can start essentially a revolution of love with small groups. I've seen it happen. I've seen miracles happen. I've seen polarized groups. And in fact, this next summer, I'm doing a big intention experiment with Republicans and Democrats to see what happens. I've seen people instantly come together when doing an intention, an altruistic intention. It changes them, it changes the brain, it changes their lives. Somebody said this to me, you're doing more than research. You're breaking open people's hearts. And I like to think of it that way. In fact, I've started a thing called the 8 Revolution, which is I've just provided free tools on my website, lynnmctaggart.com, for people who want to create Power of 8 groups and start healing the areas around them. I've also continued to do intention experiments because, as I say, I think that the real healing here is not just the action itself, but the reaction. What happens to the people who take part? And so for anybody who wants to take part in any of those things, they're always free. They're on my website. And I believe that it's true that one simple thought is all it takes to heal the world. Thank you so much for listening. And I really hope that everyone dives into Ervin's wonderful book and joins this movement from the bottom up.
Thank you so much, Lynn. That was amazing. All of your experiments have shown that there is something inside of us that connects us to all others. That's so clear in all of your experiments. And what that shows is that we're really innately hardwired to connect and to cooperate. And that's because we're all parts of the great web of life, as you've shown in all of your personal examples, and groups who have been divided for decades, generations, coming back together through that. And it really seems like you've identified what might be the holy grail of of what it is that hardwires us to all other things in the creation. If you wanted to add any further thoughts on how that secret that you refer to, or the holy grail that's within us, I mean, I know it takes the power of 8 and groups to get there, to help each other get there, but is there any way make that next leap from groups of 8 to cities or to nations or to the global community itself?
I think it's going to take a ground up movement. And that's why I started the 8 Revolution, because as I watch what's going on in the world, and I watch the devastating effect of some of the decisions of many of our leaders, I realize they don't have an answer. There's so many challenges here that it needs a social movement. And this has always been the case. When you have something specific that needs to happen, it starts from the ground up. It did with Gandhi. He wanted to liberate India from the British, so he started a movement from the ground up. It happened with Martin Luther King. He wanted to further the cause of Black equality, and so he started a movement from the ground up. So I think it's going to start with little groups. And here's the reason, too. We were meant to connect, as you said. I did a whole book on that called The Bond, essentially answering Darwin and saying, no, we were never meant to be competitive individualistic societies. We were never meant to be alone and in total competition. We were meant to be cooperative and to live in community. And communities are so fractured these days. And that was exacerbated by COVID, where we were all made to isolate for such a long time. The evidence is clear. People who are part of communities, who join groups of any kind, whether it's a bowling group or a book group or a Power of Eight group, live longer, happier, healthier lives. The science is clear on that. Community will heal you from everything from the common cold to heart disease. If you join a group next year, you will have your chances of dying. That's how important community is. So the way I see it, people can use small group intention in their community. And that's what I'm offering on my website, lynnmctaggart.com. I've got all kinds of free tools for people who join the 8 Revolution. And it's also a space where they can get Power of 8 groups, join a Power of 8 group. It's all free. I'm just providing all of these tools so people can use them to change their neighborhood, to change and use intention and small groups to start in their neighborhood and then maybe their town and community or city and so on. And I see these groups linking up because I think that's what needs to happen, a great groundswell of community that focuses on, say, getting one important thing done, and watch what happens.
Thank you again so much. And it really comes back to the title of your chapter in The Great Upshift, Healing the World from the Ground Up. And that's where the movement begins and how it eventually takes in the whole, the greater whole as well. Thank you.